Let food be your medicine. This is a very important phrase from Hippocrates, and it is always relevant because we know very well that at the basis of our health, there has to be proper nutrition. Above all, there also has to be information, education, of course, nutrition. And today, we are going to do it with two very important people for this. On my right, I have the molecular biologist expert in nutrition and sports supplementation, Dr. Christian Orlando. Welcome and welcome back. Good morning. Good morning. And then we still have on my right, Adriano Panzironi, writer and science popularizer. I was going to call you doctor, but it comes naturally. You know it comes naturally.
Also professor lately, but I'm not a doctor or a professor. However, people use this title a little bit as if it was a sign of recognition, of respect, of course, for the title.
That's right, that's right. It really comes automatically to call it in short by this name. So this is a very important block for us because it has become a regular appointment. Let food be your medicine, just to talk specifically about some diseases. The first one today is the one we introduced with this video. It's allergies. Let's see it together.
The phenomenon of allergies is taking on a worrying dimension in Italy. In fact, it is estimated that about 18 million people suffer from them, including 12 million from allergic rhinitis, 3 million from food allergies, 5 million from atopic dermatitis, 3 million from asthma, and about 300,000 from hives. The situation in children under the age of 14 is even more dramatic. In fact, 10% suffer from asthma, 20% from allergic rhinitis, and 10% from atopic dermatitis. This disease is having an uncontrolled progression, as in the 1950s only 10% of the population was affected compared to a rate of 30% today. Also of concern to medicine is the phenomenon of chronicity of the condition, despite the use of increasingly efficient drugs.
Allergies, allergies. So first of all, let's go and ask our Dr. Orlando what allergies are.
Yes, so we know that the immune system has to defend us potentially against the attacks of viruses and bacteria, then agents that are harmful to the body, while against substances that are harmless to the organism itself, it does not have to act. In the case of allergies, on the other hand, a potentially harmless agent becomes pathogenic. So our immune system recognizes it as potentially harmful and acts against it in the wrong way. The moment this then becomes chronic, it becomes a chronic inflammation that we carry on over time. As we have seen, allergies can be these pathogenic foods, can be inhaled, or they can be ingested, or they can come into contact with the skin. So we can have from asthma all the way to dermatitis to even anaphylactic shock. And then there we get precisely into very serious situations with the administration of adrenaline to get the person to recover as soon as possible. Allergy tends to occur in two phases. A first phase called sensitization, in which practically for the first time, this pathogen comes into contact with macrophages, which induce lymphocytes to produce Ig-type monoglobulins, which in turn adhere to the plasma membrane of the mast cells and then serve as immunological memory, because the actual allergy phase occurs in the second encounter with this allergen, in which this is recognized by Ig immunoglobulins present on the membrane of these mast cells that then induce the response by the immune system with an alteration of the balance between Th1 and Th2 lymphocytes, the release of substances including histamine, leukotriene, and other inflammatory cytokines, and then there the whole process of inflammation with allergic symptoms is created.
Dr. Orlando, you mentioned Th1 and Th2, then we will go into more on that. I, however, want to talk to our Adriano Panzironi about the numbers that, let's say, the introductory video gave. They are very high numbers and more worrying, because he talked that with these, they have quadrupled.
Yes, all the immune disorders are developing strongly because what we eat has the ability to alter our immune system. And so the more we eat poorly, of course, society shows us today that we are deteriorating our diet day by day. And the more this alteration becomes present as a result, immune disorders such as that of allergies also become present and increasing. We have to remember that the immune system is that system that defends us a little bit from the attacks, as the doctor was just saying, from the attacks of bacteria and viruses. So actually it would not be natural for our immune system to deal with molecules that are actually completely harmless. That's because, unfortunately, as I'm already anticipating, we have an alteration of the Th1 and Th2 system, where Th2 is more active against bacteria, and bacteria are composed of proteins. So when we eat or inhale products that have proteins, we risk that an excessive presence of these proteins can induce an immune response, as if our immune system recognizes it as bacteria. So whenever, for example, we inhale or breathe mite dust or mite feces, which are the ones that create an immune response for us, or the various pollens, our immune system responds as if we are under attack. The main problem is that the immune system has to come back into balance, and we can only do that by restoring a diet that does not go to harm our intestines and does not overregulate the one response towards these proteins.
il nostro intestino e non regoli in maniera eccessiva la risposta TH2 nei confronti appunto di queste.
Here, Mr. Panzironi, both you and our Dr. Orlando talked about Th1 and Th2, so about balance. Then, to make our viewers understand better, I would ask the director to air the video just about the balance of Th1 and Th2, so then we can comment on it.
Our immune system is based on the balance of two families of lymphocytes, those of the Th1 class and those of the Th2 class. The Th2 is composed of lymphocytes that are devoted to the destruction of bacteria, while the Th1 class of lymphocytes is devoted to the destruction of viruses, fungi, and cancer cells. For example, when we are in the presence of an attack by a pathogen of the bacterial family, the immune system raises the production of lymphocytes belonging to the Th2 class and depresses that corresponding to the Th1 class. Unfortunately, if the immune system does not resolve this inflammation in a short time, or if excessive production of the Th2 class inflammatory cytokines or histamine continues, the system may remain unbalanced and lead to the chronic allergic response. Specifically, the Th2 system maintains an immune memory that will cause allergic responses upon subsequent contact with proteins that have activated the Th2 immune system.
This video on Th1 and Th2 pretty much confirmed everything you have said previously, both you, Dr. Orlando, and our own Adriano Panzironi. So I ask our Dr. Orlando, what does it have to do with, then, nutrition? Let's get specific. Nutrition on this imbalance.
I don't want to preempt the later discussion, but certainly a bad diet goes to drive the immune system crazy, both locally, in the gut, and systemically. And then this driving the immune system crazy then leads, as we have said, to the subsequent stimulation.
Questo impazzimento, diciamo, del sistema immunitario porta poi, come abbiamo visto nel video, appunto a un'aumentata, un'eccessiva sollecitazione
of Th2, which then leads to the production of these inflammatory cytokines, which then lead to the various effects of allergy and asthma. The interesting thing is that this topic now falls into place because this is the time when we start talking about allergies. A couple of days ago, it was interesting to see how medicine gives its own solution to this, going to treat the symptom and not the cause as usual, unfortunately, going to skip the latest generation drugs, the latest generation antihistamines and vaccines, which instead we don't go to see the cause of the effect. So a diet rich in insulin carbohydrates, which bring intestinal dysbiosis, chronic inflammation in the intestines. That it all starts from, so the immune system is on the fritz, and so this is one of the important pathologies because, as I said before, it even goes as far as anaphylactic shock.
So to life-threatening. You introduced Dr. Orlando a topic that our Adriano Panzironi has been bringing forward for years, basically that of not going to treat the effect but going to treat the cause, so also to prevent the cause. I, Mr. Panzironi, always take the side of the viewer because in the end, then I am a viewer. I understand that it all depends on this perennial inflammation that we have inside our intestines.
We must always remember that in our intestines we have 1.5 kilograms of bacteria, and these bacteria, our immune system has to keep them at bay. Otherwise, we could say that we would even risk rotting from the inside, because then actually if you take a piece of meat and expose it, you see that the meat goes bad because there is uncontrolled bacterial growth. In our intestines, we don't have a total surface area of a soccer field, and so what does that mean? It means that not only do we have to be careful not to let these bacteria increase in numbers, but we also have to prevent them from conflicting with our immune system that tries to keep them at bay. In fact, we have in the intestine these cells that are bound by them by tight junctions, and when there is intestinal inflammation, what happens? This inflammation tends to widen these spaces, and then the bacteria tend to get below the surface of the inner intestine and find the so-called Peyer's plaques, which is that area of our body where lymphocytes are produced the most. We have present about 70% of our immune system that gets into a real conflict with these bacteria. So it is inevitable that overexpression of this type of warfare against bacteria using the Th2 system inevitably overexpresses this type of immune response. And then other proteins that we inhale or ingest will tend to be hyperactive always for our immune system. So it's critical to take away these insulin carbohydrates that are the basis of Mediterranean diet foods: bread, pasta, pizza, potatoes, rice, legumes, corn, because by doing so we reduce the mass of bacteria that are produced because they essentially feed on sugars. We reduce the inflammation of the intestinal wall. So we induce the restriction of these tight junctions. So we prevent the bacteria from going beyond this natural barrier of our gut, and we therefore prevent our immune system from being activated against these bacteria and producing a whole series of inflammatory cytokines that then give real information of activation of the immune system of all the districts that we have, the MALTs, the GALTs, all those mucous membranes, including the nasal mucous membrane, the throat mucous membrane, and so on, the lung mucous membrane that is always manned by mast cells that have to defend us from a bacterial attack that we might always be subjected to. But when we have inflammatory cytokines, such as also histamine, this leads to an oversensitization of this immune system that it will become almost impossible to control it. As Orlando rightly said, the problem is that dogmatic medicine thinks about reducing with antihistamines that are still an important tool, but still they reduce the sensitization of mast cells to histamine by going to block the receptors with so-called antihistamines. Or they make vaccines that are supposed to lower the immune stimulation basically by giving continuous stimulation to such an extent that they raise the threshold of tolerance. But they are always drugs that act on the symptom, and if we do not act instead on the cause, we may perhaps not suffer from limitation, but in any case we expose ourselves to diseases such as cancer or viral diseases. Because if we overexpose Th2, inevitably Th1 will be depressed.
So then, to recap what you have said, it is much more important to go to prevention, so proper nutrition, lowering inflammation in our body, than then just going to relieve the symptoms with drugs and things. Dr. Orlando, before I end this block, I wanted to ask you, so I'm inferring that nutrition may be the one provided by the Life 120 lifestyle and good supplementation can also help to prevent, if it could be prevented, or at any rate to coach, to improve, to heal. I use, of course, various terms because, as we understood, everybody then reacts differently, so both the nutrition provided in Life 120 and supplementation can help.
Of course, absolutely, yes, because as our viewer also said, it all started from gut dysbiosis, so wrong nutrition. From there, then all hell broke loose. Allergic rhinitis happened to him, but anything else could have come because then each one of us is true, genetically has an Achilles heel. And that's where The moment you create chronic inflammation due to poor nutrition, this comes out. And so a diet deprived of insulin carbohydrates that don't create gut dysbiosis and therefore that don't create inflammation is an optimal supplementation, as I had also said with the Serenity Pro, that unfortunately cortisol in everyday life is always overstressed. Or a supplement based on vitamin C, vitamin D, so that go to maintain an optimal immune system anyway, can help us to make sure that even at the time we fall on our knees and not lying on the ground.
And this is important. I wanted to conclude though, Mr. Panzironi, because you have next to you, with you, the book Living to 120, The Healings. It is a very important book because it is a real scientific research on the effects that the Life 120 lifestyle has on people. Regarding allergies, what kind of results did we get on these 10 people?
Recall that this was published 2 or 3 years ago, and the court is made up of 1,000 people who were interviewed at dinners that I did around Italy and then called back later to reconfirm. So all the data are recorded and made available to anybody that wants to check, of course, whether this data is real or not, because we like to be accurate and fair with people, especially who have been following us for so many years. One of the focuses that we had highlighted among the various diseases that we were interested in understanding the healing capacity of the Life 120 lifestyle system was allergies. In this court, 256, so 1 in 4 people, and it more or less comes back to some extent in the percentage of people in Italy who suffer from allergies. 256 suffered from it out of 1,000, and we asked them, of course, to state whether they considered themselves cured or had had an improvement or had no improvement after following the Life 120 lifestyle. The results are mind-blowing because 79% of the people stated that they were cured. So that means they had no more allergy episodes, and 21%, so getting to 100%, had an improvement. On this thing, a second question, we asked how many people had taken off medications after starting the Life 120 lifestyle, and 95% said they did not use those medications. So it means that obviously, in addition to that 79% of people who are cured and do not need medications, however, even a part of that 21%, so 2/3, did not completely resolve, but still had an improvement, but still do not use medications anymore. Only 4% have reduced the dose and 1% have not changed their medication use. What does this data tell us? They tell us that allergy, which is a big problem for society, both in terms of obviously pathological, but also in terms of social costs, would be reduced by 95% only if people in Italy executed the Life 120 lifestyle.
Here, only if the proposed entities maybe could do a little investigation, a little request information, because everything is recorded and therefore everything is in the norm.